Hello everyone and welcome to Our Ventura TV. I'm your host Sandra Siepak. On today's show we'd like to welcome Dr. Antonio Harrison. He is a behavior scientist, author, graduate school professor, and the host of the popular podcast Doc's Daily Dose for Dads. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show, Antonio.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, much of your work involves parenting from what I've seen on your podcast and your website, and workshops for dads and their interaction in the daily lives of their own children. So I'd like you to talk a little bit more about how dads are playing a bigger role in raising their kids today.
Well, you know, 20, 30 years ago, the typical role of a father was to basically just provide for the material things, the house, the food, go to work. And today it's different. Women are in a lot more positions of power. They're out in the workforce doing a lot of great things. And you've seen a switch in terms of dads' roles being at home and being more involved with the children. I mean, we have more stay-at-home dads now than ever. But the moms are still the ones buying the books, going to the workshops, seeking out help. And it always reminds me of the old adage that men don't ask for directions.
Right.
I know where I'm going. I know how to raise my child. I got it. But instead, there's a lot of help out here. So why not take advantage of that? So I'm calling on all fathers to really seek out the help because it does take a village.
I'd like to ask a little bit about your workshop that you do offer for dads and what you kind of go through in the workshop to help them kind of navigate this new dad's position in raising children.
Well, I'm actually giving a workshop at the Fathers and Families Coalition of America in March, their 20th annual conference. And in the workshops, I talk about the tools that you have currently that you can use with your children. For example, words are a big one. For my kids, there are two things I do every day without fail. One is when I drop them off at school, I tell them have a good day, have fun, listen to your teachers, be a great leader and work hard. And then I have them repeat to me, what does Daddy always tell you? You're smart, you're kind, you're important, I'm proud of you, and I love you. Give them a kiss, send them on their way. And before we go to bed, I ask them, what are you thankful for? What do you love about yourself? I tell them what I'm thankful for, what I love about each of them, a specific thing they did that day, and then we repeat, the universe bears no ill will to me, I bear no ill will to it. I become what I think about. So it's just following along with certain tools like that to know that those words can build up. Also being willing to be vulnerable as a father and a male, and communicating and telling your story. Because a lot of times fathers, their kids know their story, but not the real details to understand that they're a human being.
I think it is a different world than it was maybe 20 years ago today.
Very much so.
And dads aren't quite sure where they're supposed to be in the parenting cycle. I do think many dads today are a very important part of raising children. And I think kids really like that.
They do.
I think that they really gravitate toward that and they benefit a great deal.
Very much so.
How would you respond to that?
I think dads need to understand that being a parent is not a job.
Right.
You're not babysitting your kids. You are watching your kids, you're raising your kids. It's a duty, it's a responsibility. It should be a joy. And it's split with your spouse or the mother of your child. So you have just as much onus on making sure that they are becoming productive, kind, compassionate human beings in this world. So be a part of that. And a lot of times, most dads just need to understand it's just about being present. There's nothing special you need to do. Just be there. Right? Because you can build a wonderful home, send them to a great school, but if they're sitting in a mega mansion lonely, I'm sure they would prefer to be with their dad in a one-bedroom apartment. So.
Good point. Yeah, that's good to say. Let's talk about the topic that you brought up on your podcast, which is Batman versus Superman.
Yes.
I was intrigued by that, so I'd like to share that with our viewers.
Nice. That's actually the workshop I'm giving. Kids think of us as superheroes, especially dad. We are unbreakable, we're invincible, and that's okay. I like that. But they need to think of us as the proper superhero. Superman is from another planet. He's invincible, essentially, minus the kryptonite, depending upon how technical you're getting with your comics. But he shoots lasers out of his eyes, blows cold breath, he's faster than a speeding bullet. Whereas Batman is a real person who uses his resources and his tools. He has vulnerability, there's ups and downs. He doesn't always do right, but he always kind of reflects upon self and comes out on top. And that's what kids need to understand is, yes, I can be your superhero, but understand I'm a person. I have feelings and emotions. I'm not always going to be on point every single day. There are going to be times where I have my lows, but that's okay. That's a real human being.
Right. I mean, that's how people are.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the real thing, so you can't expect something that's not real.
No, and don't try to live up to an expectation that's impossible.
Right. What would you offer as a new mindset for dads today? What would you give to dads to kind of remember and think about as they're raising their children?
You know, it's similar to what we'd already been talking about, and reminds me of one of my great friends. His mother, I hadn't seen her in almost 10 years, and she saw me with my kids, and she just pulled me to the side and said, "You're doing a great job." And she said, "You know, I just want to tell you, no matter what happens, if you are present and you love your children and they know that they are loved and they love you back, you could be living in a cardboard box and everything will be fine."
Absolutely.
So again, I think dads need to recognize being present is a huge part of it. You are enough. You don't need to be anything better or greater than you think you need to be. Just simply being there in your child's life. And also understanding too that they are a little person. They have their own journey.
Right.
Don't try to put them into a track or a journey that you wanted for yourself or that you think they should go the route. Let their life unfold. You can be there to help, to encourage, to motivate, but you don't need to push in any tough direction.
What do you hear from dads and kids alike when you do the workshops? What are some of their concerns? What are some of their interests of parenting?
I think the biggest thing that I hear is, especially from the child, is I'm not being heard.
Okay.
I'm not being seen. You're talking at me. You're not talking with me.
Okay.
You're just telling me what to do. And a huge part of that as well is I go through a process of storytelling. It wasn't until I did a 28 episode podcast with my father, just chronicling his life from one of 11 in deep down South Louisiana. He's now 70 years old.
Okay.
So that was a different time.
Right.
And understanding he had to leave home at 12 and go on his own to Florida, and how that shaped who he was and the things that he's been through. And when I heard his story and heard it in order as opposed to these little stories here and there, it let me realize he's a human being. He makes mistakes. I understand why he's raised me certain ways. And for things that maybe I was upset about, it was easier to forgive him because now I understood where he was coming from. And a lot of times fathers don't share that story with their children. And also this 13 to 15-year-old kid, they've got a story too.
Sure.
And they need to be able to express that to their father without any judgment and just sit there and listen. Kids love discipline, but they love affection just as much.
I think that many kids today want that parent, whether it be their mom or their dad, to be involved in a lot of their life, whether it be sports, whether it be education. There's a lot of involvement that kids do feel is important. And I think, this is my personal opinion as a parent, that is important for the benefit of the child.
Very much.
How do you respond to that?
It's extremely important. I think parents have to prioritize what is most important in their life. For me, it's my family. I've left conferences, I've left work, I've changed flights to come back a day earlier to see my son play a football game.
Right.
Now that's not always possible.
Sure.
Right, but I'm gonna do everything possible to make sure they're the number one priority. Because again, I can make all the money in the world, but if my kids don't like me, they don't want to speak to me, and as they get older and have their own lives, I'm not a part of it, then what was it all for?
Right. And we should mention you are a devoted dad to 3 young boys.
3 boys.
So I think you do speak from some experience
here. Yes, very much so.
You know what you're talking about.
There's a lot going on at home.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of get a feel for it when you're doing it day to day, as much as some of the other dads out there are doing it as well. I think the hard part for a lot of dads is juggling. And juggling for a mom is tough enough. It's got to be tough for dads too. You're juggling careers, you're juggling many things that you have to be responsible for at home. and now you're juggling the lives of children. How can we better, improve on that?
Well, I think two things. One is recognizing that I'm not perfect, my kids aren't perfect. Even the advice that I share, it may work and may not work for you, but the fact that you're trying and noticing and changing means you're a good parent. Being a good parent is not being perfect. It's the fact that you're recognizing that there are things you can do better. And in terms of juggling, well, let's be honest. How many people are binging Netflix? How many people are on their phone constantly? When you're sitting there watching the game, how important is that game when your son or daughter is asking you to play? Right? We have technology now where you can record things, you can put things on pause. Me personally, I wake up extremely early in the morning to get my personal stuff done, so that way I can be present in waking the kids up, breakfast, going to school. And when they come home, I spend that time with them until it's bedtime, and then I do stuff after that. And during the day while they're at school, my youngest is only in preschool 3 hours a day, so I'm with him during that time, but once he goes to school, I also do other work. So those gaps that we have with them are very limited, because school is 8 to 3. You add in sports, you're now 5:30. So that little window you have, make it a priority to spend that time with them, because it's gonna go by fast.
It does. Kids grow up before your eyes. It's not something that you expect, but it does happen. I will say this, moms out there are going to be very pleased to hear you talk about this. Moms out there are going to say, bring it on, bring more help, our way. We really appreciate when dads are more involved. What do you say to that?
I say, moms, help me out.
That's right.
Push your husband, your spouse, whoever to come find me. Fathers need to be involved.
Yes, they do.
And if any dads take it as nagging in any kind of way, oh well. Right? Your wife or your spouse is trying to get you involved with your child, which is most important. So make it a 50-50 effort here. Put some more weight on your shoulders and drop some of the stuff that you don't need that's not as important. So thank you, moms.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Moms out there are going to be very grateful that you are saying this, believe me. I think the tough time is when children are young and babies and toddlers, and maybe a dad doesn't feel as connected to do a lot of things with them at that point, maybe until they're older. But I do think that they should still try. Any response on that?
It's interesting. My middle child, when he was born, for the first 8 months of his life, only my mother, my wife, and my niece could touch him.
Oh, really?
He wouldn't let me hold him. And it was one of the most heartbreaking things in the world, because I wanted to be a part of my son's life, and he just wanted no parts of me. But even though that's a world that we maybe not be used to, it's still something we have to try. Whether it's having your wife pump for breast milk, so that way you can feed the baby and get a connection. Putting the child on your chest while you're sitting there watching the game and hanging out or reading. Being involved as much as possible. Getting up in the middle of the night. It'll give you a bit greater respect as well for what your spouses have to go through. So it's okay if you don't know, but unless you try, you will never learn.
And you've got to ask. Just, ask those questions, be involved. If you're not sure, at least dive in and try a little bit. You never know.
Just try.
Even if you make a mistake, you learn from mistakes.
You'll grow.
That's the best part. Why don't you give us the website and information on viewers looking for more information on what you're doing in the workshop and also on your podcast?
Perfect. You can go to rebirthbx.com. That's my website. The podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music. It's also done in a video format where you can see the videos on YouTube, Doc's Daily Dose for Dads. My email is there, my phone number. I'm completely accessible to anybody and everybody, including moms.
That's right.
So
very good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Antonio Harrison, for joining us on the show today. You've given us some great tips and lots of good advice, too.
Thank you.
And we do appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for joining us today on Our Ventura TV. I'm Sandra Siepak. See you next time, everyone. Bye.